The unbelievable request. Jason had never expected his life to change so suddenly. Just a week ago, he was a regular guy, living in a small apartment, working a 9-to-5 job, and enjoying his quiet, simple life. But everything had shifted the moment he got the email about the new roommate. The message said only one thing: "Your new roommate will arrive today. Please make them feel at home." When Jason opened the door to his apartment after work, he expected to meet another student, or maybe someone from the tech company he worked at. What he didn't expect was an alien. The creature standing in the living room was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. It wasn't a giant, terrifying monster, like in the movies, but it was definitely different. Its skin was a soft, shimmering blue, and its large eyes, each one 3 times the size of a human's, glowed a faint green. Jason's first thought was that the alien must have been sent here for some kind of government experiment. But the second thought, the one that sent a chill down his spine, was that this alien looked just like a human in many ways. "Hello," the alien spoke with a calm, soothing voice. The accent was strange but clear. "My name is Zivara. I come from the planet Aloria." Jason stood there, frozen for a moment. He had heard rumors about alien encounters, but this was real. His mind raced, his heart thudded in his chest. Should he run? Call the police? Or just stay calm and try to figure out what was going on? I wasn't expecting an alien," Jason stammered, trying to wrap his head around what was happening. Zivara smiled. "I know this is unusual. I assure you, my presence here is peaceful. I've come to learn about human culture. Earth is very fascinating." Jason blinked, still unsure if he was dreaming or if he had stepped into some kind of science fiction movie. "Oh, okay. Well, welcome, I guess." Zivara nodded, seemingly pleased with the greeting. He didn't seem to notice the uncertainty in Jason's voice. "Thank you. I've arranged everything. We will share this space." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Share? Yes. In our culture, sharing living space is a great honor. It is a custom on my planet to live closely with others, even in sleep." Jason's mind couldn't keep up. Share living space, even in sleep. What did that mean? Before he could ask another question, Zivara continued. "Tonight, we will share a bed. It is a necessary part of our bonding process." Jason felt his stomach tighten. He stared at Zivara, trying to process what he just heard. "Wait, what?" The alien's large green eyes blinked slowly, almost like he didn't understand why this was such a big deal. "Yes, sharing a bed is how my species forms a connection. It is important for understanding each other." Jason's mouth went dry. Was he hearing this right? "You want me to sleep in the same bed as you?" Zivara nodded. "It is a cultural practice. On my planet, it is a sign of trust. You will not be harmed. You will simply rest while we exchange our thoughts. It is a peaceful connection." Jason's mind spun. This couldn't be real. There had to be some misunderstanding. He was not going to sleep in the same bed as an alien, no matter what their customs were. But Zivara seemed so calm and serious, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. Jason opened his mouth to refuse, but before he could speak, Zivara gently raised a hand. "Please understand, human. Refusing is not just a matter of discomfort. It is a serious cultural breach. To reject the bond would be to dishonor me. And it could lead to consequences for both of us." Consequences. Jason felt a wave of panic. Was this some kind of threat? He didn't know what to say. I don't think I can do this," he said, his voice shaking a little. Zivara's expression softened. "I do not wish to cause discomfort, but if you do not agree, I may have to leave. And that would mean the loss of the valuable connection we could share." Jason felt a sudden pressure. What did he mean by valuable connection? Was there something bigger going on here? Was this alien just trying to learn about humans, or was there something more to it? You're not going to hurt me, right?" Jason asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zirith smiled reassuringly. Of course not. I would never harm you. I simply wish to understand you better. This connection will allow me to learn about your thoughts, your feelings, your life, without causing you harm. We will both benefit. Jason was still not convinced, but something about Zirith's sincerity made him hesitate. He didn't know if he could trust this alien, but he also didn't want to cause any kind of conflict. Could he just go along with it for one night? Fine, Jason said reluctantly. One night. But just one. Zirith seemed delighted. Thank you, human. You will see, this is a small sacrifice for the great knowledge and understanding we will share. As Jason followed Zirith into the bedroom, his heart was still pounding. He had agreed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger happening here, something that would change his life forever. Would sharing a bed with this alien really help them understand each other? Or was it something much more complicated and dangerous? The night was just beginning, and Jason had no idea what he was getting himself into. Understanding the Galactic Custom. The next evening, Jason found himself standing in front of the shared bedroom, pacing back and forth. His mind was still trying to process what had happened the night before. It wasn't that he didn't trust Zirith. Well, maybe it was that, but the whole situation felt too strange, too foreign. Sharing a bed with an alien. Jason's mind kept going over the words. A galactic custom. What did that even mean? When Jason had agreed to the bed sharing, he did it reluctantly, mostly out of confusion and a desire to avoid a confrontation with someone who could, for all he knew, be far more powerful than any human he had ever met. But tonight, he was determined to understand what was really going on. Maybe he could find some reason behind this odd practice and perhaps, just perhaps, figure out a way to get through it without completely losing his mind. Jason turned toward the bedroom door, his hand hovering over the handle. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. I see you're still unsure, human, Zirith said, standing just behind him, as if he had been watching Jason's struggle from the other side. His voice was calm and soothing, the way someone might speak to a nervous child. Jason turned and forced a smile. Yeah, just trying to figure all this out. It's a bit much. Zirith smiled back, his multiple eyes twinkling. I understand. Your culture is very different from ours, and I respect your hesitation. But allow me to explain a little more about why this is so important. Please, sit. Jason followed Zirith into the room and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the soft, unfamiliar material beneath him. The bed itself was strange, a floating surface with a warm metallic glow. It didn't seem to have any rigid shape or structure, but somehow it adapted to every movement, like it was alive. Zirith sat beside him, his skin shimmering faintly in the dim light of the room. I will tell you more about my people, Zirith began. On Aloria, we do not bond in the ways you do. We do not form friendships over shared meals or conversations as you might. Our deepest connections are formed through proximity, through sharing our personal space. Jason raised an eyebrow. You mean, like, hanging out, sitting together? Zirith shook his head, his multiple eyes narrowing slightly. No, it is not merely hanging out. In your culture you have physical contact, but you also have personal boundaries. You do not allow others into your space unless you trust them deeply. For my species, trust is not only emotional, it is physical. When we sleep next to another being, we do not simply share the space, we share a part of ourselves. We exchange thoughts, dreams, feelings. Jason stared at him, his head spinning. Wait. You mean, when you sleep with someone, you can, like, read their mind? Zirith nodded slowly, as if Jason's confusion was perfectly normal. It is not quite mind reading. It is a deeper connection. When we sleep beside someone, we connect on a subconscious level. Their thoughts, their fears, their dreams, all of this becomes a part of us, and we of them. It is a bonding, not just of the body, but of the spirit. We learned to understand each other in a way words could never convey. Jason was silent for a moment, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. So, you've been, sharing my thoughts since last night? Not quite, Zirith said with a small smile. We must be in physical proximity for the connection to fully form. It is why this practice is so vital. When we share a bed, we share our most vulnerable state, sleep. It is the most honest form of existence, where no barriers are left. For me, this is how I learned about your humanity, how I can truly understand who you are. Jason let out a small laugh, though it was more nervous than amused. That's honestly kind of terrifying. Zirith's smile faded just slightly, but he seemed to understand. I know, to you, this may seem invasive, but we do not take from you. We simply learn, and it is mutual. I will not just learn from you. You will also gain from me. Our bond will allow you to understand my world, my species, my struggles. It will give you insight into a galaxy far beyond what you have known. Jason swallowed hard. He couldn't deny there was something almost mesmerizing about Zirith's calm assurance. The alien seemed so certain, so gentle, that the very idea of rejecting him felt impossible. And yet Jason was overwhelmed by the notion of having his thoughts, his private dreams, opened up like an open book to someone. Something so foreign. But Zirith, Jason hesitated, looking down at his hands. What do you mean by mutual? I'm not just some lab experiment to you, am I? You've been studying me like some kind of subject. Zirith's face softened, and for a moment, his eyes looked almost human, tender and genuine. You are not a subject to me, Jason. You are a being, with your own thoughts, your own life. I do not see you as a specimen. I see you as a partner in this experience. This exchange, this sharing of space, it will help us both grow. It will help us bridge the gap between our species, and perhaps, just perhaps, it will show both of us something deeper than either of us understands right now. Jason was silent, processing Zirith's words. There was something compelling about the alien's sincerity, but the fear of the unknown gnawed at him. Could he truly allow himself to bond with someone? Something so different from him. Could he open himself up in this way? The thought of connecting so deeply with an alien was both frightening and fascinating. Zirith seemed to sense Jason's hesitation. I know this is difficult, but think about it this way. We are not so different. We both have fears. We both have desires. We both long for connection. In my culture, this practice is seen as an opportunity to grow stronger together, to learn not just from the other's mind, but from their heart, their very being. Jason took a deep breath, still unsure. But what if I don't want to do that? What if I don't want to share everything? Zirith's face became serious, but his voice remained gentle. Then you would deny me a connection that could change everything. And perhaps more importantly, you would deny yourself a chance to see beyond the limits of your own world, to experience something vast and beautiful. But I understand if you are not ready. Just know that my offer will always remain. Jason sat back on the bed, feeling the weight of Zirith's words pressing down on him. This was no simple request. This wasn't just about sharing a bed. It was about sharing a part of himself that he hadn't even considered. It was about opening a door to an entire galaxy of possibilities, of unknown experiences, of connections that reached across the stars. As he looked into Zirith's patient, understanding eyes, Jason couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if he took the leap? Would he regret it, or would he uncover something incredible, something beyond his wildest imagination? The room felt colder now, and the bed between them seemed larger, more imposing. Yet, somehow, it also seemed like the key to something Jason couldn't quite understand. Yet, a night of shared space. Jason had never been more unsure about anything in his life. The evening had come, and Zirith was calm and collected as ever. He seemed to have no qualms about the situation, walking confidently around the apartment as if he had been living here for years. Jason, on the other hand, was a bundle of nerves. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood by the bedroom door, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a heavy, unseen force. He had agreed, hadn't he? Just one night. That was all. Surely he could get through one night of this alien bonding custom. But the more Jason thought about it, the more uneasy he became. He didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what Zivara would do once they were in bed together, connected in ways that Jason still couldn't fully comprehend. Zivara, for his part, seemed completely unbothered. He moved gracefully through the room, preparing the bed. It was unlike any bed Jason had ever seen. It wasn't a traditional mattress and frame, but a floating surface, shifting and pulsing with a soft, metallic glow. There was no headboard, no footboard, just a smooth, undulating surface that seemed to adjust itself with each movement. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a piece of alien technology that Jason had no way of understanding. "Don't worry," Zivara said, his voice smooth and comforting. "This will be easy. Just relax." Jason nodded, trying to steady his nerves, but every part of his body screamed in protest. He didn't know why, but the idea of lying down beside this alien felt like the ultimate violation of personal space. He was supposed to be comfortable with this, right? After all, Zivara had explained it was for bonding, for learning about each other. But still, it just felt so wrong. "Okay," Jason muttered, taking a deep breath and forcing himself to walk toward the bed. He could feel his palms sweating as he moved closer. His body seemed to scream at him to turn around and run. But he didn't. He couldn't. This was something he had agreed to. He had to face it. Zivara looked at him, the expression on his face warm but expectant. He gestured to the bed. "You can lie down first if you like." Jason hesitated for a moment, but then, deciding he couldn't stall any longer, he lay down on the soft, shifting surface. The bed immediately adjusted itself around his body, molding to fit his shape in a way that felt almost alive. It was a strange sensation, like being enveloped in a warm embrace. And for a moment, Jason almost felt at ease. Almost. Zivara lay beside him, his body naturally aligning to the bed, though it seemed to float slightly above it. His glowing blue skin seemed to shimmer even more as he settled in, his many eyes blinking slowly as he turned toward Jason. "Are you comfortable?" Zivara asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. Jason wasn't sure if he should answer. He didn't feel comfortable. He felt awkward, exposed, and uneasy. But then he realized that maybe Zivara wasn't asking about physical comfort. Maybe it was something deeper, something more emotional. The alien seemed to be waiting for him to let his guard down. "Yeah," Jason said, though it was only half true. He wasn't comfortable, but he didn't want to offend the alien again. "I'm fine." The silence between them felt thick. Jason could feel Zivara's presence beside him. And while it was strangely soothing, it was also unsettling. The bed beneath him seemed to hum faintly, almost like it was alive. And Jason couldn't shake the sensation that this wasn't just a physical bond. This was something deeper, something he wasn't ready for. Suddenly, Zivara spoke again, his voice low and almost hypnotic. "Relax, human. Close your eyes. Let the connection happen." Jason didn't know what to expect. He had heard Zivara talk about this bonding process, but it was so far beyond anything Jason had ever experienced. The idea of sharing his thoughts, his feelings, and his most personal memories with someone, or something, he barely knew made him feel exposed in ways he couldn't explain. But Zivara's voice was gentle, and somehow, Jason felt himself obeying the command without even thinking about it. His eyelids grew heavy, and despite his unease, he closed them, willing himself to relax. At first, nothing happened. It was just the sound of his own heartbeat, the soft pulse of the bed beneath him, and the strange sensation of Zivara's presence so close. The alien's breathing was slow and rhythmic, and somehow that sound seemed to calm Jason, as if it was soothing him into a sense of safety. But at the same time, he was aware of the strange feeling of his mind opening up, like a door creaking open just a little bit. Jason felt something. A connection, but not the kind he was used to. It was subtle at first, like the faintest whisper in the back of his mind. And then it grew stronger. Suddenly, Jason found himself in the middle of a vivid, surreal experience. He wasn't just lying in the bed anymore. He was somewhere else. He was floating in space, surrounded by stars, and the feeling was overwhelmingly peaceful. He could sense Zivara beside him. Though he wasn't sure how, it was as if they were both drifting through this vast cosmic sea together, experiencing the universe as one. Jason could feel Zivara's thoughts, feelings of calm, curiosity, and something deeper, something that Jason couldn't quite name. But then, the experience began to shift. Jason saw flashes, brief glimpses of memories, but not his own. They were Zivara's memories. He saw images of a distant planet, lush with strange vegetation, cities that floated in the sky, and skies that rippled with colors Jason had never seen before. He saw the aliens' people, their glowing skin and their peaceful nature, living in harmony with their environment. The images were fleeting but intense, and Jason could almost hear Zivara's voice, though it wasn't coming from his mouth. "This is Aloria. This is my home. This is where I come from." Jason could feel Zivara's love for his world, his deep connection to the planet that had birthed him. The connection wasn't just mental, it was emotional, as if Jason himself was feeling Zivara's experiences, his joys and his sorrows. It was overwhelming, and Jason didn't know how to process it all. And then, just as suddenly, the images faded. The quiet hum of the bed returned, and Jason found himself back in the apartment, his heart racing and his body drenched in sweat. His eyes shot open, and he was back in the bed, lying next to Zivara, who was still calm and composed. Jason sat up, breathing heavily, his head spinning. What was that?" he gasped. Zivara didn't move, his expression unreadable. "That was the bond. Human. You have felt a part of me, and I have felt a part of you. We have shared something beyond just sleep. We have shared understanding." Jason couldn't believe it. He had seen things, felt things, things that weren't his own. It was as though he had touched the very essence of Zivara's being, and yet he was left with more questions than answers. "Is this what you meant?" Jason asked, his voice shaky. "Is this what it's all about?" Zivara nodded slowly, his large eyes meeting Jason's with an intensity that was almost too much to bear. "Yes, human, this is just the beginning. There is much more to learn, about me, about you, and about the universe that connects us all." Jason swallowed hard, his heart still pounding in his chest. He had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. But at the same time, he had never felt so connected to another being, not in this way. And as much as he wanted to pull away, to end this strange bond, he couldn't deny the curiosity, the longing to understand more. He looked at Zivara, feeling the weight of the moment. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, but I guess there's no turning back now." Zivara's smile returned, though it was soft, almost knowing. "No, there is no turning back. But that is the beauty of the bond. You do not need to be ready, human. You only need to be open." And with that, Jason knew that everything had just changed. The price of connection. Jason couldn't shake the feeling of having crossed a line he hadn't even known existed. The night had passed in a blur of strange dreams, vivid memories, and surreal sensations that left him both exhilarated and terrified. When he finally managed to wake up, he found himself in the same bed as before, his body still trembling with the aftershocks of the bond. Zivara was already awake, sitting cross-legged at the edge of the bed, his glowing eyes studying him with an intensity that was both comforting and unnerving. Jason rubbed his temples, trying to clear the fog in his mind. He felt different, not in a way he could describe, but something had shifted. The quiet hum of the bed was still there, almost like a heartbeat in the room. But it wasn't just the bed that had changed. It was him. Somehow, the events of the night had opened something inside him, something deep and unexplored. He looked over at Zirith, who was now standing up, moving with that fluid, otherworldly grace that seemed so natural to the alien. There was something about Zirith's calmness that made Jason feel both at ease and small. The alien had said that the bond was mutual, that they would both learn from it. But Jason was starting to wonder if the price of this connection was more than he had bargained for. "You're quiet today, human," Zirith said, his voice soft but knowing. "Did you find the connection difficult?" Jason paused, thinking carefully. "I don't know how to describe it. I felt everything. Everything about you. It was like I was in your memories, living your experiences." Zirith nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, that is the nature of our bond. You have touched my past, my culture, my emotions, and I, in turn, have touched yours. It is the price of understanding, the cost of true connection." Jason swallowed, his throat dry. "But what about me? What about my thoughts? My memories? What did you see? What did you feel?" Zirith hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if he was contemplating the answer. "I felt your fear, your confusion. I saw the loneliness you hide beneath the surface, but I also felt your strength, your curiosity. These things are not always visible in your outer actions, but they exist deep within you. The bond shows all, both the light and the shadow." Jason recoiled slightly at the alien's words. The loneliness. Was that what Zirith had really sensed? It was true, of course, that Jason had never been one to open up easily. But he hadn't expected the alien to dig so deep, to peel back layers of himself that he hadn't even acknowledged. And yet, part of him couldn't deny the truth in Zirith's words. Was this what it felt like to truly be seen? "You've learned a lot." Then Jason said, more to himself than to Zirith. "About me. About my life." "I have," Zirith replied simply. "And you have learned from me as well. This bond is not one-sided. It flows both ways. I know the things you have hidden from the world, the things you have kept buried." Jason felt a chill creep up his spine. "What do you mean? What have you learned from me?" Zirith's eyes softened. "I know your struggles, human. Your world is complicated, but you have much to give. And you have much to learn. You cannot escape who you are, but you can grow beyond it." Jason's heart raced. What did Zirith mean by that? The alien's words seemed to weigh heavy on him, like some kind of cryptic prophecy that he couldn't quite understand. Was this bond pushing him towards some kind of transformation, something that would force him to confront parts of himself he had long ignored? "I don't understand," Jason murmured, rubbing his face. "How is any of this going to help me? To help us?" Zirith's gaze remained steady, almost patient, as though he had expected this question. "You do not see yet, but you will. The bond is not just about learning each other's pasts. It is about understanding the present. By sharing our thoughts, we exchange more than just information. We exchange perspectives, experiences, emotions. This allows us to find common ground, to see the world through the eyes of another. And in doing so, we learn how to navigate it together." Jason's head spun. It sounded profound, almost like some kind of cosmic philosophy. But what did it really mean for him? For his life? He had thought that by sharing this intimate experience with Zirith, he would simply know more about the alien. But now, it felt like something deeper was happening. Something that went beyond just understanding. This wasn't just about bonding with a being from another world. It was about changing, evolving, becoming something else entirely. "What if I don't want to change?" Jason asked, his voice quiet. "What if I'm not ready to be someone else?" Zirith's expression didn't falter, but there was a slight shift in his tone. Change is not something that can be forced. It happens when the mind is ready, when the heart is open. This bond, it reveals your true nature, the parts of you that are hidden, even from yourself. It is not my intent to change you, human, only to show you the potential you have within. Jason stood up suddenly, feeling restless. He couldn't stay in this room, trapped in these confusing thoughts. He needed air, needed space to think. He stepped toward the door, but Zirith's voice stopped him. "Do not run from the bond, Jason," Zirith said, his voice calm but firm. "You cannot outrun it. You cannot escape what has already been shared between us." Jason froze, his hand on the doorknob. For the briefest moment, he thought about walking out, about ending it all right there. But the alien's words had struck him in a way that he hadn't expected. Zirith wasn't threatening him. He wasn't trying to control him. He was simply stating a truth that Jason couldn't ignore. There was no running from this. The connection had already been made, and as much as Jason wanted to reject it, he knew deep down that he couldn't. Taking a deep breath, Jason turned around and looked at Zirith. "What now?" he asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. "Now," Zirith said, standing and walking toward him, "we continue our journey. Together. The bond is still new, but it will grow stronger with time. There is much you have yet to see, much you have yet to understand." Jason's mind raced. He wasn't sure if he was ready for all of this, but the alien's calm assurance was almost comforting. He wasn't being pushed into anything. Zirith was merely offering him a chance to grow, to learn, to see the universe in a way he never had before. But there was something more to this, something that Jason wasn't fully grasping yet. He could feel it in the air, in the silence that filled the room. It was as if this bond was pulling him toward something, a place, a realization, something far beyond the physical connection they had shared. "I don't know what's next," Jason said slowly, "but I think I want to find out." Zirith nodded, his expression almost proud. "Good. The journey will not always be easy, but it will be worth it. Together, we will discover things beyond imagination." As Jason looked into Zirith's eyes, he couldn't help but wonder what he was really getting himself into. But the truth was, he didn't know if he had a choice anymore. The bond had already taken root, and somehow, deep inside, Jason felt a strange sense of anticipation. The next step of this journey wasn't just about sharing a bed. It was about sharing everything. And that, Jason realized, was only the beginning. The ripple effect. Jason had never felt so out of control in his own life. The night had brought unexpected changes, but now, as the days stretched on, the bond with Zirith had begun to weave itself deeper into his existence. It was as if every thought, every action, every moment was influenced by the connection they had formed. What had once been a simple, isolated experience in a foreign bed was now something much larger, something that he couldn't ignore. The strange part, though, was that it wasn't just his thoughts and emotions that seemed to be affected. It was the world around him, too. It was subtle at first, like a small flicker of static in the air. Things felt slightly out of place. Small things. A change in the way his coffee tasted, the way he could feel the hum of the electronics in the room as if they, too, were alive. He started noticing things that he hadn't before. The way the plants in the corner of his room seemed to lean toward him. The way the colors of the walls seemed a little more vivid in the early morning light. And then it happened. Jason was walking through the streets of the city, the bustling crowds moving around him. The noise, the chaos, it was all so typical. But suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, he stopped. It was as if a quiet pulse had rippled through the air, and he felt it deep inside him. Something had changed, not just in him, but in everything around him. He turned quickly, looking for the source of this strange feeling, and saw Zirith standing across the street, his glowing skin barely visible beneath the shadows of the alleyway. He was just standing there, observing him. No words, no gestures, just a quiet presence. Jason's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible that the bond had already begun to affect the entire world around him, too? He walked over to Zirith, his mind racing. The alien's presence was calming, almost like a deep breath after holding it too long. "What's happening?" Jason asked, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and unease. Zirith didn't immediately respond. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Jason with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through him. It was as if Zirith could see the ripple inside of him, the subtle shifts in his being that had started to manifest. "The bond has begun to stretch beyond us," Zirith said quietly, his voice strangely soothing. "It connects us not only to each other, but to the world itself. What you feel, I feel. What you sense, I sense." Jason's pulse quickened as he tried to process what Zirith was saying. "So it's not just our minds. It's everything. The whole world is affected." "Yes," Zirith replied. "The universe is not separate, Jason. It is all connected. Life, thought, energy. We are not just individuals floating through time. We are part of something much larger, something infinite. And through this bond, we can feel that connection." Jason swallowed, trying to steady his racing thoughts. "And what does that mean for me? For us? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Zirith's expression softened, his multiple eyes focusing on Jason with a kind of knowing. "What you feel, what you sense, is not an accident. It is the beginning of something important. This connection between us is the key to understanding the universe. But it is not just about knowledge. It is about action." Jason wasn't sure if he understood. Was Zirith asking him to do something? But what could he do? He was just a human, a person from Earth, barely scraping by in his everyday life. He wasn't special. He wasn't like Zirith. But then again, maybe that was the point. Maybe he didn't need to be special. Maybe this bond was trying to teach him something deeper. "I'm not ready for all of this," Jason said, his voice trembling slightly. "I can't just change the world. I don't even know what you're asking." Zirith's face softened further, and there was a hint of understanding in his gaze. "You are not alone in this, human. You have already made the first step. You have opened yourself to the bond, to the connection. What happens next will unfold naturally, but it will require your participation." Jason took a step back, trying to process what Zirith was saying. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was certain: everything was different now. The world had shifted, and he could feel it. But the question remained, what was he supposed to do with that feeling? How could he, a simple human, understand something as vast and complex as the universe? The days that followed only deepened Jason's confusion. Every little shift in the world felt like a sign, like a breadcrumb leading him toward some larger truth. But the more he felt it, the more overwhelmed he became. One morning, as he sat in the same cafe where he had met Zirith weeks ago, something peculiar happened. The usual crowd of people around him seemed to fade away. It was as though the noise and movement of the world had been muted, leaving only the space between him and Zirith. Jason turned toward the alien, his mind racing. "Can you feel it too?" Jason asked quietly. Zirith nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, the pulse is strong today. You are beginning to notice the fabric of the universe. It is not just about feeling things physically, Jason. It is about understanding the interconnectedness of all things. When you think, when you act, it ripples out. The smallest choice can have consequences far beyond what you can imagine." Jason thought back to everything that had happened so far. The strange dreams, the visions, the growing connection between him and Zirith. It had all seemed like it was leading up to this moment, this realization that the bond was not just between them. It was something larger, something universal. "What does this mean for me, Zirith?" Jason asked, his voice filled with both awe and dread. "What am I supposed to do with all this power, all this knowledge?" Zirith's face was unreadable, but there was a certain heaviness in his gaze. "It is not power, Jason. It is understanding. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. You must learn to navigate this bond carefully. You must learn to use it, not for control, but for balance. You are part of something larger now, but that does not mean you control it. You must become one with it. Jason let out a shaky breath. The weight of Zirith's words sank deep into him. Balance. It was a word that felt foreign but familiar at the same time. He had spent so long trying to control every aspect of his life, but now everything was out of his hands. The bond had unlocked something inside him that couldn't be undone. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and Jason found himself unable to focus on anything else but the alien's words. He couldn't escape the feeling that his life had been irrevocably changed. The universe was opening up in ways he had never imagined, and whether he was ready or not, he was a part of it. Later that evening, as Jason sat in his apartment, trying to make sense of everything, he looked up at the sky through his window. The stars were more vivid than he had ever seen them before, twinkling with a kind of secret knowledge. Jason felt the hum in the air, the ripple of connection running through the world, and he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The bond between him and Zirith was not just about two beings sharing thoughts. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of life itself, the ripple effect of every action, every choice. Jason wasn't sure what role he was supposed to play in all of this, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. And neither would the universe. The unseen forces. Jason wasn't sure how long he had been sitting in his apartment, staring out at the night sky, lost in his thoughts. Time had become a strange, malleable thing. It was as though every moment was stretched thin, like a thread pulled too tight. The more he tried to make sense of the strange connection he had with Zirith, the more his mind felt like it was unraveling. Was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? What else was he supposed to learn from this bond, this strange exchange of thoughts and emotions? The night had fallen silent, save for the soft hum of the city in the distance. But Jason knew he wasn't alone. He never was anymore. Jason. Zirith's voice interrupted his thoughts, smooth and deliberate as always. You are more connected to the world than you think. Jason turned to see Zirith standing in the doorway of his apartment. The alien's presence was both calming and unsettling, like the quiet before a storm. There was something different about him tonight. The glowing lights on his skin were flickering more intensely than usual. And his eyes, they were darker now, more intense, as if he were seeing things Jason couldn't. What do you mean? Jason asked, his voice quiet, almost unsure. Zirith stepped forward, his movements fluid, and sat down across from Jason, a comfortable distance away, but close enough to feel the weight of his gaze. The bond between us has begun to unlock more than just our shared experiences. It is affecting everything around you now. The connection you feel is not just between us. It is a part of the universe itself, a force beyond time and space. Jason frowned, trying to keep up with the alien's cryptic words. A force beyond time and space. What does that mean? The final choice. Jason stood at the edge of the rooftop, gazing out over the sprawling city below. The skyline was a jagged silhouette against the deepening twilight, the lights from the buildings flickering like tiny stars. The wind tugged at his hair, carrying with it the scent of the ocean far beyond the horizon. It felt surreal, standing there alone after everything that had happened. The quiet hum of the city was oddly comforting, yet Jason knew that peace was no longer an option for him. Everything had changed. Everything was different. The bond he shared with Zirith had unlocked parts of himself he didn't know existed. He had learned to feel the pulse of the universe, to understand that his every thought, his every action, rippled out into the world around him. What he hadn't expected, though, was how the weight of that knowledge could crush him. There were forces in play, forces beyond his comprehension, and the responsibility to maintain balance in the universe had been thrust upon him. Jason closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. The power, the responsibility. It was all too much. He wasn't ready. He had never asked for any of this. But Zivara had made it clear. There was no turning back. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice, one he had grown both accustomed to and yet feared in equal measure. "Jason." Zivara's voice resonated behind him. Jason didn't need to turn around to know that the alien was there. He could feel Zivara's presence like a weight on the air, a constant pull on his senses. Jason's chest tightened. "I'm not ready," he muttered, his words barely more than a whisper. Zivara remained silent for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. Then, with a tone that was neither comforting nor harsh, the alien spoke. "There are times in life when one is thrust into roles they never asked for. The universe does not wait for readiness, Jason. It waits for choice." Jason turned to face him, his heart pounding in his chest. "What are you saying? That I have to choose now? That there's no more time?" "Yes," Zivara replied, his gaze unwavering. "The forces I spoke of are gathering. Their presence has already been felt, rippling through the very fabric of existence. Chaos is encroaching. It is inevitable. But it is not too late. You have the power to tip the balance one way or another." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. Chaos. The very word made him feel small, insignificant. How was he, a single human, supposed to stop something like that? The weight of the decision felt too great, like standing on the edge of a cliff and being asked to leap into the unknown. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do," Jason said, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't understand it all. I can't be the one to make that choice." Zivara's expression softened, but there was no pity in his eyes, just understanding. "You do not have to understand everything, Jason. Not all at once. What matters is your willingness to act, to trust in the bond we share, and to trust in yourself." Jason took a step back, his mind spinning. The connection between him and Zivara was undeniable, but so were the questions that gnawed at him. Could he truly carry the burden of the universe's balance? Could he really be the one to stop the coming chaos? And what if he failed? What if his decision caused even more destruction? "There is no perfect choice," Zivara continued, his voice low but steady. "But there is always a choice. You are part of this, Jason, not by accident, but by design. You are more than just a human. You are a conduit between worlds. And it is your choice, your action, that will shape the future." The weight of Zivara's words settled in, and for the first time, Jason didn't feel overwhelmed by them. He didn't feel like he was being crushed under the expectation of the universe. Instead, he felt something else, a quiet stirring deep within him, a sense that he could do this, that he wasn't alone. Jason swallowed, the decision still hanging heavy in the air. But a strange calmness had begun to wash over him. He had always struggled with making choices, especially the difficult ones. But now, for the first time, he could feel the pull of the universe around him, urging him forward. I don't know what's going to happen," Jason said, his voice gaining strength. "But I know that I have to try." Zivara nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly as though measuring Jason's resolve. "Good. The universe will not wait forever. You will have to act soon. But when the moment comes, you will not face it alone. I will be with you, as will the bond we share. Trust that the universe is guiding you, even if the path is not clear." Jason turned his gaze back to the city below, his mind whirling with the enormity of the choice he had just made. The decision wasn't easy. There would be no guarantees. The forces of chaos were coming, and there was no way to predict what might happen. But something within him had shifted. He was no longer just a passive observer of the universe. He was an active participant, and whatever came next, he would face it. "You're right," Jason said, his voice firm now. "I'm not going to let the universe fall into chaos. I'll find a way to make it right." Zivara's face softened with something like approval. "You have already made the first step, Jason. That is all that is needed. The rest will unfold as it must." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jason could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the choice still settling in his chest. But there was no fear now, just a quiet certainty. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he had to face it. He had to face the forces that were coming. And he wasn't going to do it alone. Zirith's voice broke the silence once more, a final reminder. Remember, Jason, balance is key. The universe will test you. It will push you to your limits. But if you stay true to the bond, true to your understanding, you will find the strength you need. Jason nodded, feeling the weight of his decision settle into place. He wasn't just Jason anymore. He was part of something much bigger, something greater than himself. And as the night stretched on, as the stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse above him, Jason finally understood what he had to do. The moment of choice had come. And now, it was time to step into the unknown. The universe was waiting.